Hello and welcome to Foreign Dispatches, the program that takes you around the world in 25 minutes. I'm Teniola Shoboale. On the program this week, countries around the world impose new restrictions amid struggle to contain the highly infectious Delta variant. Authorities in several countries from Indonesia to Australia and South Africa are racing to contain the spread of the highly contagious Delta variant of the coronavirus. While vaccination campaigns have brought down infections in most countries, the rise of the Delta variant has stoked fears of new waves of a virus that has already killed 4 million people. Well, let's begin by taking a look at the situation in Indonesia, where officials say hospitals are near collapse.
On Tuesday, the Red Cross warned that Indonesia is on the edge of catastrophe as coronavirus infections fueled by the deadlier Delta variant surge across the country are pushing the health system towards collapse. Indonesia has reported record daily COVID-19 infections of more than 20,000 in recent days. Hospitals in several designated red zone areas have reported overcapacity, including the capital Jakarta, with its isolation beds 93% occupied as of June the 27th. Choked hospitals have resorted to treating patients in corridors and in tents outside.
There are a lot of people waiting in emergency units, and we've also seen a lot of cases that were dead on arrival because of a lack of beds. The patients had to wait until there's bed space before they can be treated.
With hospitals edging towards full capacity, a growing number of patients are being turned away and asked to self-isolate at home instead, fueling the rush to buy oxygen.
We brought our son to the hospital and waited for 2 hours to get into the ICU. He had tested positive, but the hospital told us to just give him some medicine first, as the hospital is full.
We've been looking around at every shop to find oxygen cylinders, but they are all sold out. They have some here, but the price now is way more expensive than usual.
Calls have grown from health workers for tighter restrictions as infections surge to unprecedented levels. There's been reports that nearly 1,000 Indonesian health workers have died from the virus since the pandemic started. According to officials, the capital city has also recorded an average of over 130 barrels per day from June the 16th to the 21st. A total of 72,000 COVID-19 related burials have been recorded since March last year. Adding to the dire situation is the country's slow pace of vaccination, with less than 5% of its 270 million population fully vaccinated, or about 13.1 million people, according to the Health Ministry. At least 27.4 million have received the first dose.
Australia, praised for its handling of the pandemic, had achieved some form of normal where people could visit restaurants and join crowds at festivals and other events. However, the story has changed. More than 12 million people are now under COVID-19 lockdown as authorities struggle to contain fresh outbreaks of the Delta variant.
Australia is seeking to ramp up its COVID-19 vaccination drive as it battles a widening outbreak of the Delta variant. The first local case of the highly contagious strain was detected in Sydney 2 weeks ago in a limousine driver who transported airline crew. The outbreak has since grown to at around 150 cases.
We have to be prepared for the numbers to bounce around, and we also have to be prepared for the numbers to go up considerably, because as experience shows with this strain, we are seeing almost 100% of transmission within households, and we're seeing a very high rate of transmissibility. The most important message I'd like to give everybody is every time we leave the home, we have to assume that ourselves or other people around us have the virus. That's the way we have to live during the lockdown and beyond. We just have to assume that we have the virus or that others around us have, and we have to act accordingly.
The situation is prompting other major Australian cities like Brisbane and Perth to join Sydney under lockdown, affecting over 20 million Australians.
This full lockdown is designed to act as a circuit breaker, to buy our contact tracers and testing systems time to gain a truer picture of how far this outbreak has spread.
What I want to see in progressive days is that we start seeing all of the cases being effectively isolated that we're announcing, and that's going to be a key indicator of success. At the moment, we are still seeing some cases that were potentially infectious in the community, but what we're hoping is because of the lockdown, the number of interactions those cases have had where there is a potential for transmitting the virus would have decreased significantly.
Meanwhile, Australia has announced new measures to try and boost its low vaccination rate, including mandatory shots for aged care workers and employees in quarantine hotels.
We will be implementing a new no-fault indemnity scheme for general practitioners who administer COVID-19 vaccines. So this relates to encouraging Australians to go and chat to their GP about their vaccination and to have their vaccination administered. The Delta variant is proving to be a far more difficult element of this virus than we have seen to date. This is not just the case in Australia. It was certainly my experience when I was overseas that the Delta variant is presenting very different challenges from those that we have faced in the past.
Officials are also making the AstraZeneca vaccine available to people under 60, after previously limiting its use to over 60s due to concerns of blood clotting. Authorities now say people under 60 can request the AstraZeneca vaccine if approved by their doctors, who will be covered by a no-fault scheme similar to other practices seen overseas. So far, Australia has kept its COVID-19 cases relatively low due to snap lockdowns, contact tracing and strict social distancing.
It's a similar case in Fiji, where authorities have imposed new restrictions. After keeping the coronavirus at bay last year, Fiji, with a population of around 900,000, is now recording as many as 300 new cases a day as part of a wave of infections linked to the highly transmissible Delta strain.
The Pacific island nation of Fiji is grappling with nearly 300 new COVID-19 cases a day linked to the highly transmissible Delta variant, and that's in a population of less than 1 million. Fiji weathered the early stages of the pandemic by closing off its borders, a move which kept transmission under control while decimating its bustling tourist industry. This latest outbreak has been linked to a breach in quarantine facilities. The community of Kauai has been sealed off, a tightly controlled zone with only health workers allowed in or out.
We are going through a really hard time because of the restrictions, with the number of cases growing, with what we're expecting the government to try and, which everyone's waiting, everyone's sitting on their hands, and while we're doing that, we're still trying to make sure that we are trying to run a business, trying to feed the families of those that are working for us, that like the crew, they still have their own families, they still have their own rent to pay. So I think it's, as a business owner, we still have that responsibility.
Fiji is not alone. Other Pacific nations like Papua New Guinea and French Polynesia have also seen a rise in cases. The World Health Organization says the Delta variant is the most transmissible of the variants identified so far.
Delta is the most transmissible of the variants identified so far. Has been identified in at least 85 countries and is spreading rapidly among unvaccinated populations. As some countries ease public health and social measures, we're starting to see increases in transmission around the world. More cases means more hospitalizations, further stretching health workers and health systems, which increases the risk of death. As we have said, new variants are expected and will continue to be reported. That's what viruses do. They evolve. But we can prevent the emergence of variants by preventing transmission. It's quite simple. More transmission, more variants. Less transmission, less variants. That makes it even more urgent that we use all the tools at our disposal to prevent transmission. The tailored and consistent use of public health and social measures in combination with equitable vaccination. This is why WHO has been saying for at least a year that vaccines must be distributed equitably to protect health workers and the most vulnerable.
International health organizations say this is a wake-up call for the Pacific.
The rise of cases in Fiji is definitely a wake-up call for Pacific nations who absolutely can prevent a first wave from reaching their shores. It is not an inevitability that we will see COVID taking over in the Pacific. People are well coordinated. Governments and humanitarian organisations are working together. They are learning lessons from across the Pacific and across the globe. And the importance of the vaccination campaign is absolutely paramount. People must go out and get vaccinated, and that can help to arrest any caseload. And it doesn't have to happen in the Pacific. It really, time for preparation is now.
Almost 50% of Fijians have received at least one vaccine dose, while just over 6% have received a second, with AstraZeneca and Sinopharm being the administered vaccines.
And in South Africa, where the Delta variant is also dominating new infections, President Cyril Ramaphosa has announced tough new restrictions to limit the impact of a third wave of the coronavirus. For the next 2 weeks, alcohol sales are banned and all gatherings, including political and religious, are not allowed. Our South Africa Bureau Chief, Betty Dibia, tells us more.
President Cyril Ramaphosa began by telling his critics that yes, mistakes had been made, but steps have been and are still being taken to correct them. 13 days after his last address to the nation, he told the people the picture is back to black.
As I address you this evening, the situation has gotten worse. Along with many other countries on our continent, Africa, South Africa is seeing a massive resurgence of infections. The Africa Centre for Disease Control and Prevention reports that a third wave of the disease is underway on the continent. To date, the African Union member states have reported over 5.2 million cases and over 138,000 deaths from COVID-19.
One of such mistakes made may have been the removal of the AstraZeneca vaccine from the national rollout plan after scientists discovered it had only a 25% efficacy against what is now called the beta variant. Top vaccinologist Professor Shabir Mahdi was a lone voice asking the government to hold back from discarding.
And with all of these vaccines, there's still a very strong reason to believe that even the AstraZeneca vaccine and every other vaccine, even if vaccines have not been evaluated in South Africa, that they will still provide significant protection against severe disease and death from COVID.
The AstraZeneca vaccine has interestingly been found to have 92% efficacy against the Delta or Indian variant, which is now said to be fueling South Africa's third wave.
Cabinet has decided that the country should move to adjusted alert level 4. Cabinet decided that to ensure that our response is appropriate and proportionate, in other words, equal to the current situation, additional restrictions are necessary. And we are therefore announcing this evening that we will place these additional restrictions in place for the next 14 days. And after 14 days, we will examine exactly where we are.
The impact of the return to level 4 restrictions on various sectors of the economy is sparking a huge debate across the country as the government also juggles to attain a balance of the so-called lives and livelihood debate. South Africa's first wave lasted for 15 weeks, the second was nearly 9 weeks, and when the third wave will end is still up in the air as the numbers on the picture change for the worse daily. Hopefully the next 2 weeks will bring better signs.
When Foreign Dispatches returns in just a moment, intense heat wave hits Canada and the United States. Please stay with us. You're still watching Foreign Dispatches on Channels Television. Dozens of people have died in Canada amid an unprecedented heat wave that has smashed temperature records. In British Columbia, around 100 more people than usual died over a 4-day period as temperatures reached nearly 50 degrees Celsius.
Canadians on the West Coast took refuge from the sun anywhere they could this week as summer temperatures hit record highs.
It doesn't feel like Vancouver, but it's an interesting experience. Yeah, it's been nice getting outside, but we've basically been consuming gallons of water the whole time.
Extreme heat soared up to all-time highs of 50 degrees Celsius in the Pacific Northwest on Tuesday. Before Sunday, temperatures in Canada had never passed 45 degrees Celsius.
The all-time Canadian record was broken on Sunday, with Lytton in the province of British Columbia recording 46.6 degrees Celsius. This smashed the previous record. Normally when you break a record, it's by a small margin. This smashed the previous record by a full 1.6 degrees Celsius. Less than 24 hours later, Lytton broke the record again. This, to be underlined, it's in the province of British Columbia. It's home to the Rocky Mountains, the Glacier National Park, and yet we're seeing temperatures which are more typical of the Middle East or North Africa.
In Edmonton, community outreach workers have turned their attention to the most vulnerable Canadians. The heat wave has claimed the lives of dozens, many of them elderly.
There's going to be a lot of people going to be ending up in the hospital and being really, really sick from this because some of them don't know how to look after themselves.
In Vancouver alone, heat is believed to have been a contributing factor in the unexpected deaths of 65 people since Friday last week. And in British Columbia, 100 more deaths than normal had been reported over a 4-day period. Meanwhile, demand for air conditioning has quadrupled.
That's 4 times as much as what we typically see, especially in June. Usually we don't get this heat till July, maybe August, so definitely surpasses what we've ever seen before.
High sustained temperatures are unusual in the region, which is much more accustomed to bouts of rain over sun. British Columbia closed schools and universities due to the record heat.
The U.S. Northwest has also seen record high temperatures and a number of fatalities. Experts say the heat over western parts of Canada and the U.S. has been caused by a dome of static high-pressure hot air stretching from California to the Arctic territories.
An unprecedented heat wave hit the U.S. Pacific Northwest, causing some bars and restaurants to close and sending many flocking to the nearest pool on Sunday. In the usually temperate states of Washington and Oregon, homes and businesses have long gone without air conditioning. But the National Weather Service forecasted high temperatures, climbing to more than 30 degrees above normal in parts of those states.
It's already bad enough not having air conditioning, but to have no power at all in this heat is dangerous.
Seattle, Washington on Sunday saw temperatures reach an all-time high of 40 degrees Celsius. In Portland, Oregon, temperatures also soared to an eye-watering 44 degrees Celsius. According to the NWS, that's the hottest temperature since records began in 1940.
It's scorching. Thank God for the little bit of AC we get from the ocean. If it wasn't for that, man, it would be terrible. But it's really bad, and we got to find ways of getting out the house, swimming, get behind a cool tree, under a cool tree with a cold beverage, something, anything that makes it better,
Experts say the extreme heat is caused by a dome of atmospheric high pressure over the upper U.S. Northwest and Canada.
The heat is being caused by a atmospheric blocking pattern. So it means that, these very high temperatures are concentrated over one particular area. And normally you have the jet stream, which is this fast, high-moving belt of wind, which moves these weather systems on. And it's not happening this time. So we've got, it's almost like a pressure cooker effect. You've got very, very, very high heat. It's not limited to North America. Other parts of the Northern Hemisphere also experiencing exceptional early hot summer conditions. Arabian Peninsula, Eastern Europe, Iran and the northwest Indian continent, just to name a few areas. Western Russia has also been seeing very high temperatures.
Officials say extreme weather events such as the late spring heat waves that have descended on parts of the United States this year can't be linked directly to climate change. But more unusual weather patterns could become more common amid rising global temperatures.
I think what we're seeing with climate change is that it is acting on and exaggerating all kinds of climatic conditions. And so it is making things worse. We're seeing more frequent fires, more severe fires. We're seeing them at a scale, not just in terms of area, largeness, but intensity plus area combining. I've got children, I've got grandchildren. What kind of world are they going to inhabit? It's going to be a very different one. If the climate change trajectory isn't flattened, then all those will be overridden. I mean, all those temporizing things, all those small-scale things we do, will simply be overwhelmed.
Some states have opened emergency cooling shelters, most of them in public libraries for residents without AC units to help escape the searing. But many stores quickly sold out of air conditioning units, fans, and even ice.
And finally on the program, residents in the UAE have found an interesting way to cool off: ice bath therapy. But experts say it comes with an additional bonus, boosting the body's immunity and building inner strength. Take a look.
As the morning sun bakes the orange dunes of the UAE desert, a man lowers himself into a chattering tub of ice.
And he sits down, he holds his breath,
Another participant, Abdulaziz, enters the bath with a grimace, but holds her breath calmly, as directed by Benoit, who coaches participants on breathing techniques.
Beginning is a bit scary, you want to get out, you can't control your breathing, but now I'm okay. Totally fine.
I'm a passionate, hot and cold person, so I do this combination of desert and ice baths with people, and they seem to enjoy it. I like to take people out of their comfort zone and give them an experience of body and mind, reconnect with nature.
Weathering such extreme discomfort is an attempt to boost the body's immunity and connect with an inner strength.
The temperature difference increases your immune system. You stress your system for a short period of time, which makes you stronger. So the higher the bigger the difference in temperature, the better for your body.
Cold water immersion and breathing techniques have been made popular by Wim Hof, a Dutch cold water enthusiast who holds several world records for cold exposure. Hof has developed his own methodology with similarities to ancient Tibetan Buddhist breathing techniques, comprising breathing, cold exposure, and commitment. Participant Russell Tagari agrees that the beginning is the hardest part, but then the benefits come.
The beginning is always hard to adjust, and then once you release, and you realize that your mind is more powerful than your body, and your mind controls your body, and you have to make your body obey your mind, and that's the secret.
Benoit, a former banker and now executive coach, says old, young, athlete or non-athlete, the techniques are good for everyone. And a bonus is escaping the soaring heat.
Well, this is where we say goodbye till next time. Remember, our top stories are never far away. You can catch them on channelstv.com. Thank you so much for watching the program. I'm Teniola Shoboale. Stay safe.